Hello and welcome back. We are the Simplifiers podcast and so thrilled to have everyone tune in today where we take topics either in business or in life and simplify it. Literally, that's it, as simple as it gets. And I am so thrilled to introduce to you today a very smart woman who's going to help us simplify goal setting. Her name is Brittany Hoopes, and she is a podcaster and qualitative researcher with a focus on goal setting and achievement. After graduating from New York University, where she studied theater, she worked at several New York City talent agent and management offices. She soon shifted her focus to market research and branding, where she became a qualitative researcher and narratologist for large B2B and consumer studies. Brittany began Soultiply in 2014 and hosts the Soultiply with Brittany Hoopes podcast. I can't wait to tell you more about her on that. She now lives in Los Angeles, California with her husband. I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, Brittany Hoopes.
Hi, Mary. How are you doing today?
I'm so good. I'm glad that you're on the podcast because I get this question a lot. Right, I want to set goals. I want to take action in my life, in my business. I want to make things happen, but geez, I get so overwhelmed with goal setting as a whole. So, Brittany, please give us the wealth of knowledge that you have. Help us simplify goal setting once and for all. Where do we even begin?
Well, I think a good place to begin is getting out of your head. You know, I think that's why it gets so complicated for us a lot of the times is that we're so in our head and we feel the weight of that goal. We feel the lack of it. We feel what it would mean to us and our lives if we accomplished it. And it's like all those emotions get clouding up your brain and it clouds up your vision and it gets you in the way and it can paralyze you. It can overwhelm you. It can do all these things. So first, I would recommend don't take yourself or your goals too seriously. You know, it's all just life. You know, goals are all just things that we want to happen in our lifetimes. And I think that's why the stakes are so high, you know, because it's like, there's nothing more important than your life. Like that's as important as it gets. And so when we have that vision for ourselves, we can get really caught up in it, but you just have to kind of figure out ways that you can incorporate and fun and a framework that's going to lead you to the life that you want to live. Because if the journey isn't fun, you're not going to stick with it.
What's the point, right? So before we dive into the practical side, like how do we actually make goals that can actually stick, that I can accomplish? I want to back up a little bit and talk more about you and your journey. So you were an actor for God knows how many years, right?
Oh my goodness. Since I was 3.
Wow.
I mean, my parents tell the story that, I mean, at the moment I could talk practically, I would point at the TV and be like, I want to be on there, you know? And I did that from a very young age, did a lot of community theater, did theater all growing up and in school, professional theater. I mean, my kindergarten time capsule said I wanted to be a movie star. And I pursued it all the way up through school, went to NYU and studied theater, even did professional theater outside after graduation, you know, did some off-Broadway theater.
So you went from off-Broadway to being an expert in goal setting. How did that come together?
A strange turn of events. I think being an actress to me, that was my goal and something that I had pursued my whole life and wanted so deeply my whole life. I mean, I would cry watching the Oscars, just wanting that so bad. And it took me, there was this moment where I realized the actual act of acting wasn't bringing me happiness anymore. And that was really hard to take apart my identity of like Brittany is actress and separate that from my goal. Not to mention, I didn't want to disappoint my family, which had always been so supportive. Didn't want to disappoint my friends. I didn't want people to think that I had failed in some way. All these things. And I'll be honest, it took me about a year. But once I realized that really wasn't my dream anymore, it got me thinking, well, how strange is this thing called goals? You know, how can you be so deeply invested in something and what keeps us from living the lives that we want to live? And I was insatiable. I consumed anything I could get my hands on to have to do with goal setting. And then through a whole other series of events, which I don't even know if we'd have time to go in here, I stumbled upon a career in market research, and I started working with B2B clients, and in a very creative way. I mean, narratologist is the study of how and why we tell stories. And so it was interviewing experts in different realms through storytelling exercises is kind of where I got my start. And that was deeply creative, deeply satisfying. And I realized you could get to the underpinnings of a lot of these topics that way. And so I thought, oh, how cool would it be to do my own research on goal setting?
Yeah.
And so I moved into that realm. And now with the podcast and everything, I feel like a little bit of my performance is coming back to me. I just joined a competitive belly dancing team.
Fun.
Earlier this year. It's the first time I've been on stage for probably 4 or 5 years since I've stopped acting. And it's so strange. You don't have to give up anything forever. You just have to listen to your heart and what is true for you in that moment and your goals.
Well, and I think that's very telling and an interesting point that you bring up. I mean, I think if you can imagine your entire life as a book, right? Yeah. There are different chapters of it. So what, drove you and motivates you when you were a teenager versus your 20s, your 30s, it's okay to turn to the next page and to the next chapter, right?
Absolutely. And I think the key there is that identity component, maybe especially when you're younger. And that's why I do a lot of research with driven, primarily women, primarily millennials. And it's because they're just kind of coming out of that phase of their life where their identity is so caught up. I mean, I was Brittany equals actress. My parents go to a cocktail party. They're talking about what play I'm in to their friends. Anybody, I was most likely to go to Hollywood in my high school yearbook. Brittany equals actress. And it was terrifying to me to recognize if I took away that actress and I didn't have something to replace it automatically, who was I? Like, am I still alive? And I had to finally jump and make that leap. And yeah, it was probably 6 months to a year. I had no clue what I wanted to do. And I felt like I'd lost myself. I had to relearn who I was.
Yeah.
And that's the danger of attaching too much of that identity to that goal. And I'm really interested in studying that.
Well, and I think it's also interesting that you brought up the concept of sort of pleasing others. And I think that's a trap, and feeling like, oh, if I'm not this person, then so-and-so is not going to get blah, 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 blah. And I think, would you agree that in the data and the research that you've done, that when you can let go of this feeling like you have to live up to a certain identity for somebody else, you become more free?
Absolutely. And that's something I really try to focus on with my Soultiply podcast is talking to real life goal getters that are in the thick of it and that authenticity factor. I mean, yes, I love talking to successful people. I love to celebrate their goals with them. I love to do that too. But I'm more concerned about people who are going through it right now and can have that authentic, factor. And I like to be very transparent about my own goals. Yes, I study goal setting. Yes, I still have troubles with goal setting. That's why you study and why you learn. And I think worrying about what other people have to think, I know for me, it was almost a self-inflicted worry, especially if you're very driven. And I've noticed that in a lot of my research that I speak to very driven millennial women. They've done really well in school. They're used to this reward system, I do A and I do B and that will lead to C.
Right.
And in the real world just doesn't operate that way. And so even though they might not have the desire to pursue that goal anymore, like I did with acting, they're afraid it's going to be perceived as failure, as they gave up, they did this. And I mean, yes, we have to balance it, right? You have to stick with your goal long enough if you do truly want it to see results. But if it's something you truly do not want, it is not a passion of yours, then I think there's no shame in letting that go and be very transparent with it. And I can't tell you how many people have reached out to me when I'm transparent with that story saying, I just honestly didn't want it anymore. Yeah. People who are in creative industries that feel that pressure saying, thank you for saying that. Like not everybody wants the same thing their whole life. And that's okay.
It's okay. And when you say that and you give yourself that release, you can feel your shoulders drop and you go,
oh yeah. Oh right? My goodness. That is the truth.
Yeah. So let me ask you then, what I find in my own goal setting, and yes, I'm all about preaching, like taking daily action towards what's most important, even if it's crazy, even if it's like not perfect, just take daily action and one step in front of the other. But how do you overcome the overwhelm? Like truly make goals and goal setting and taking action fun again. Give us some tips.
Absolutely. And I think it comes back to a little bit what I was beginning to mention at the beginning is not taking yourself or your goals too seriously, realizing that it's your life and if you want to see these things, you have to take these action. And I think it's about infusing fun into it again, because that overwhelm is like a freezing. We feel we are stopped dead in our tracks, because of it. And it clouds our mind, it clouds our vision. So I really say the first thing that you should do is recognize in your life right now, as it is in this moment without your goal, recognize what's bringing you joy, because we might have put that part of ourselves on the back burner for so long that we don't even know the answer to that question anymore. And it's like, how can you infuse that joy into your goal action? So, I would even say, take a piece of paper, fold it hot dog style, write things that bring you joy on one side. I keep a personal list. It has over hundreds of things like flowers and walks and things that bring me joy. And then your goal actions on the other side. And they might seem very disjointed for a little bit. They might, but your goal is to try to kind of match those up. And, I think sometimes we think that goals need to be a struggle. There needs to be this climbing this mountain so that I can look at the top and all these obstacles. And a lot of times those are very self-inflicted. And what if we didn't have to struggle? What if we enjoyed the journey? Well, if we can enjoy the journey, we're not going to feel as overwhelmed. We're going to actually enjoy the process, which means we're going to stick with it more. And, and then it isn't like you've worked for years and years and years for this one moment of greatness. Like you felt the greatness the whole time. So, say your goal is to find your soulmate. You might think that you have to go out to local pubs or bars to do that and meet new people. And maybe if you're like me, you're like, oh, too loud. I hate that, But no, step back and say, okay, well, what activities do you actually enjoy? Maybe you'd love to go to the beach, maybe signing up for a beach volleyball league, a co-ed, or whatever have you. A beach volleyball league might be something that you meet your people, because I feel like you really meet your people and you meet your goals when you're in joy.
I love it. And, it's funny because I write on my daily planner, sometimes write it in big, bold letters every now and again on top of it that says, what if it were easy? And sometimes you have to remind yourself that, what if it were easy? Because we have as a driven woman myself, I put big, scary goals down. And, sometimes just reminding yourself, what if it were easy? And give yourself that breathing space to go, oh, yeah, actually, maybe I could just do this little step. And that step snowballs into this step, snowballs into that one, and goes from there. Yeah.
And talk about simplifying, right? What if it were easy? That's ultimate simplification and ultimate joy, really. Because when it starts to feel easy and when we're in that mindset that's like, hey, I welcome this into my life. I'm making space for it. I'm, I would consider myself a spiritual person. Soultiply obviously kind of alludes to that. But I think it's all about your mindset and welcoming things into your life as well. And all of a sudden, things that might have seemed hard to you several months ago or whenever you had this other type of mindset that was filled with that overwhelm and that fear, the same exact situations, physical situations, could feel so much better and have that sense of ease.
I love it. And I think sometimes we're the ones that get in front of ourselves, right? We're the ones getting in our way. That I also find that sometimes if I just literally get my phone and set a 7-minute timer and be like, right, I'm going to brain dump all the ways I can make this easy. It's amazing. The answer is in you. It's already in you most times. And it just takes a matter of, getting out of your way to find it.
Exactly. And infusing it with that joy, I feel like helps you get on that path. If you're having trouble with this ease and you're like, but my goal, it's so scary, Brittany, like, how do I break it down? How do I really focus on these things? Because there might be some actions for our goal that really scare us that and they might be actions that we continually have to take. Just for example, when I was first starting out the podcast, reaching out to some of my girl crush, biggest goal setters was scary to ask them to be on the show. Oh my goodness. So you know what I did? I like to infuse elements of gamification, which was actually the second thing that I was going to mention, making it fun. Haven't we played games since we were young? We know what it feels like to want to win, to have fun, to engage with others. And in this case, it's to engage with ourselves, to engage with our goals. And I created this color tracker. Okay. I'm getting really Lisa Frank here. Like
Yeah.
I created this color tracker that has, oh my goodness, I don't even know how many little boxes, and it has a secret message. It's like the color by numbers thing. You remember those sheets we'd have as kids? And I love to track my progress. So reaching out to a guest for my show, I got to color in one little box. And I mean, it doesn't quite, I created it for myself, so it doesn't have the oomph it would if somebody else created it for you.
But still,
there's a secret message that appears that's very motivational once I color in all those boxes.
I love it.
And it's very similar to bullet journaling. It's very similar to why Fitbit and all the fitness challenges are so, and Orange Theory and all these things, this gamification for our goals can really get us on this track of working towards something that kind of gets us out of our head. Because I feel like we kind of have our ego, or whatever you might call it, that thing that's that doubt that's getting in them, those mental obstacles that we're coming up against. We got to outsmart them.
Yes.
We got to outsmart them at a time when we're feeling really nice and motivated. We got to come up with the action plan to, I like to liken it to the emergency, like break open the glass and pull out what you need when you need it. Because when you're spiraling and when you have those negative thoughts and that overwhelm, that's not the time to try to come up with the magical plan to achieve your goals. No, you need to come up with that when you're feeling really good, feeling really motivated. And I mean, I literally write mine down. I have mine in my phone. I have it on my desktop, my action plan for when I feel like I have spiraling negative thoughts.
Yes.
And I know just to go to it. Don't even think, follow what it says, because Brittany in her motivated mind came up with that, and she was thinking clearly then. So I'm going to listen to her then. And,
yeah, it's so smart. I mean, I have my clients who I coach and mentor, we have this really cool little cash flow forecast spreadsheet that we give them, that when they fill out a certain number in it and it goes green, it's like, woohoo, it's gone green. Like it's something, it's so simple, but we just to get the number to go green, it makes all the difference in the world, because it does make it into a game. I love it.
Absolutely. And that's something that I found in the research too, the act of checking off the to-do list. When you get deep and you are speaking to people and you're asking, okay, what is that deep internal feeling of contentment when it comes to goal setting? That is that's the example that comes up again and again and again. And it really caused me to kind of look and say, okay, why is that so satisfying for us to be able to check that off a to-do list? A lot of people stick with paper planners for that very reason, that it feels better to do it on paper than to even, use technology for that. And I think it really comes back to seeing that progress, feeling that movement, because sometimes with our goals, we're making really great progress, but we aren't seeing it yet. It's like when you've been on the diet for 3 weeks and, maybe you can notice those 6 pounds or those whatever it might be, but the world doesn't see it yet. Your clothing isn't, maybe it's a little bit looser. You still got to stick with it. Doesn't mean it's not working.
Yeah.
And if we can bridge ourselves between that just starting and the seeing the real results and living the real results, that's what we have to overcome there.
And so building on that helps us actually how do we make goals that actually stick, right? And when I say stick, I mean like goals that are true to our life purpose and where we're headed, but also stuff that we accomplish. Like can you give us some tips on how to make those kinds of SMART goals?
I think it's the foundation and the mindset of which you're coming from. I mean, honestly, I feel like most of us know the actions that we need to take, the logical actions, or if we don't, there's a course out there on the internet that can show you. There's a website that can show you. The actual actions, believe it or not, we would just do those all day long. It's the mental obstacles that are getting in the way. And that's why I find so endlessly fascinating is that we have the hours in the day just like anybody else to do these things, and yet we don't. And so I know that this might sound a little unconventional and a little dismal even, but I kind of say that the goal has to hurt. Now, I don't mean like, ow, physical hurt, although for some people that might be their circumstance and that's unfortunate. But I mean that it has to hit this breaking point within yourself, and the goal setters that I speak to, the ones that have stuck with their goals and have had tangible success, they can describe to me, everyone has their breaking point story, that moment when they open their eyes and they say, I just can't live this way anymore. And the road to continual motivation is so clear to them. It's that light bulb going off in your head. And when I refer to it as a breaking point, I really mean it's actually quite the opposite. It's the holistic point, it's my whole moment. And for me and kind of some of my personal health goals, I had that when I realized I had some kind of chronic irritation that I was dealing with that was entirely food driven. It was like a reaction to a food allergy. And once it hit my mind that the fact that I was eating sugar, I had such a adverse reaction to eating sugar, and I was causing that to myself. Every moment I felt pain, that was because something I was putting in my mouth. I can't describe to you. That was my breaking point, or my whole moment, because it was like, I cannot ingest another piece of sugar if I know that I'm causing that to me. Now, I can tell you, I put on so many diets before then, off and on, this and that, for vanity reasons, other reasons. You got to find the reason that is going to motivate you more than anything, and be that moment that you're going to share with people down the road once you achieve it. And I feel like that's what's going to make it stick. And if you're saying, well, Brittany, I haven't had that breaking moment, like, how do you just have that light bulb switch? I think asking yourself why continually. Okay, so why do you want to give up sugar? Oh, okay, because I want to feel better. Why do you want to feel better? Well, I want to have a family one day, and I need to be there for my eventual kids. And oh my gosh, I just married this handsome husband. I want to be there for him. And and asking yourself why will get to that boiling point
and get to the core of it, because there may be vanity and all that on the outside, but really deep, what's driving you?
That's what's going to stick. Yeah. I mean, the superficial reasons, you could want those for a couple weeks, and then Cheetos might sound nicer, a few weeks down the line, and I'm just using weight as an example. It could be any type of goal that you're achieving that applies to this, but you need to get to that core reason, and you need to not let a day go by that you don't review that core reason. I would do it in the morning when I wake up. I had it as my desktop, background on my phone. Anytime I'm feeling unmotivated, go back to that core reason, because the stakes need to be high. And I think that's funny. That's something I realized with acting. It all comes full circle, right? In performance, when you're acting, what makes an engaging performance is the high stakes. Your character needs something so desperately from that other person on stage that every motivation, every way that you say your line, every action infuses with that. Well, it's the same with our lives and our goals. It has to be that high stakes for you to want to stick with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's true, because, it happens. This is my own personal reflection on this. I think what you're saying is 100% true. You set a goal, right? Week 1, you're like, yeah, I'm doing the thing. It's happening. I'm like, go, 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 go. I feel pretty good. Life is good. All that. Week 2 happens, and you hit a bump in the road, and you're like, oh, well, that kind of sucked. And then you're like, oh, well, I can get back. I'm going. I'm keep on doing. I chug along, and maybe some other bump hits you, but you're like, oh, I'm chugging along. I'm trying my best. And then week 3, ish hits the fan, and you're like, ugh. All right, well, Cheetos it is. And I guess that wasn't important. And then week 4, it's gone. It's gone. Like, the goal is not even in your mind, because your goldfish brain has forgotten it entirely. And so I think what it is, you're right. Like, it has to be high stakes. You have to look at it every single day and remember that why, and the deep, deep reason of why this is such a breaking point and why it's so important to take daily action on it.
Yeah.
But then it's like the third thing is that you have to remember. Like, I think we just literally forget what our goals are. And we get stuck in the hamster wheel of life and just like go, 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 going. And we look at all the bright, shiny objects that steal our attention, and we forget where we're headed.
Yep. And that's your ultimate priority. I mean, and that's why I love goal setting so much, and why it means so much to me is it is your life. There is nothing more important. And this ultimate why is the core of what you want to experience in your life. And I mean, a lot of people say, oh, it's got to be the thing that gets you out of the bed in the morning. Well, how about let's take that for what it is. I say, put it in your phone and look at that why before you get out in the bed in the morning.
Yeah.
Look at it while you're in bed and get up saying, I'm going to start this day in pursuit of that. And then you don't have to worry, oh, what is the how or what is this? Because you're open to it. You're like, as long as I'm pursuing that core reason, that core why, then it might not even be the goal of which you originally thought, I mean, with acting, for me, I realized that I just really love looking forward to something and working towards something, and goal setting. That's how I found into it. It didn't have to be acting for me, although it satisfies that same part of me that used to be so inspired by that goal. Things can shift,
It's funny that you should mention that, looking at your goal, looking at it on your phone. I just learned this, like, literally this week, that if you have an iPhone, anyone that's listening at home, if you have an iPhone, phone, you have reminders on your phone as an app. You can voice record your reminders like, hey, don't forget to call Brittany on Monday at 3 p.m. and it'll set a reminder. But did you know you can type in, and I do this now, any mantras that you have or what your goal is, type it into your reminders in your iPhone, and then you can set it to remind you automatically when you get close to a certain location. So let's say you want a goal of, I'm going to make $25,000 in the next 2 months or whatever. Let's say that's a goal for your business. When you get close to your office, it will ping you that reminder. Either when you're arriving to that location or when you're leaving that location, it will say, ping, I'm going to make $25,000 by blah, 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 blah. Isn't that amazing?
Location-based goal setting. I love it.
So,
how cool is that? Oh, I'm setting that up as soon as we hang up.
Yeah. And so it's just in your reminders app in iPhones. And you can also set it to a certain time. So it reminds you every single day or when you get near a location. So let's say your weakness is donuts and you walk by the donut shop every single day to drop your kids off or to school or to when you go to the office, you can ping yourself of no, Mary, don't go. It's not worth it.
I love that. And that gets right back to that point of needing to outsmart when you're in clear thinking, outsmart when you feel that you might be in that weakness.
Yes.
And I mean, that just sounds perfect. That's going to remind you when you need it most, and maybe snap you out of that mood of overwhelm or failure or shame or dejection or whatever it might be. It could snap you out of it and be a game changer. That's fantastic.
Totally. So tell us one or two more tips that we can use, practical tips, very simple stuff to help us overcome mental obstacles.
Well, I think it's recognizing the obstacle, identifying that cause of it. And I mean, a lot of this is just, I suggest just take pen and paper, journal it out. You need to be, I think in order to be a successful goal setter, you have to be able to kind of confront yourself and be honest with yourself and really put these things down on paper. And then it's all about, once you recognize that obstacle, you identify the cause of it, and then you sit down to plan that workaround, like I just mentioned, that break here in case of emergency, if that way that you're feeling comes up. So I could give you an actual real life example that I use. I noticed, and this is the nerd in me, okay? But I literally wrote down all the excuses that I could think of for all of my goals that I'm currently pursuing right now.
I love it.
Oh my goodness. You would scare you to look at this Excel spreadsheet. It's the researcher in me, I think. I mapped out where my excuses impacted multiple areas in my life. And I had this one little nifty excuse that spanned 6 different areas of my life. And when I saw that on paper or on the computer, I was like, whoa, if I could get over this one excuse here, it would impact, talk about getting the bang for your buck, it would impact 6 different other goals and areas of my life. And so for me, it was having spiraling thoughts. It was like the moment you get feeling dejected, then I would start thinking of every little thing that I'd failed at and it just spirals down and down and down. So to get back to the simplified point, I took that example, spiraling thoughts, and I thought, Brittany, when you're not feeling spirally, what do you need to do that you can't remember in that moment? And so for me, it was I love this app called Headspace. It's a meditation app. Take out your Headspace meditation app. They have an SOS meditation. It's just a few minutes long. Listen to that. And then take off everything in your schedule that you don't need to do that day and replace it with self-care activities. Like you swipe the day, and just focus. And honestly, since I've implemented that promise to myself, quite honestly, I've had spiraling thoughts, I won't lie, but they used to take me days. I would get into like little slumps of days of feeling bad about whatever. Now it's a matter of 30 minutes to maybe 2 hours max, because I have the blueprint to what I need to do to overcome that feeling. Now, it doesn't just have to be negative thoughts. It could be overwhelm. It could be feeling lazy. It could be anxiety. Any sort of number, anxiety, any sort of number of, feeling or emotion that comes up to you that you recognize as a roadblock to your goals.
Yeah.
Like I said, the action itself, once we get over the fear and all these things, isn't so hard. It's the mental roadblocks. And man, everything I do in my work and my research is to try to figure out how we can outsmart ourselves. And I would say that is one simple strategy to at least start out with.
So I love that. I love the idea of writing your goals down first, but then writing all the excuses that you could possibly come up with that for why you can't achieve those goals. And then taking that one step further and going, right, what is my coping mechanism when I hit that trigger point, and how am I going to recover? What am I going to give to myself? I think it's coming back as like nourishing your body, your brain, your everything, so that you can recover quickly and get back on the road to taking daily action, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what's nice about this too, if you're worried about like, well, I can't take care of myself because then I'm doing that and I'm not pursuing my goal. And then my goal is just sitting there and collecting dust. And no, don't look at it this way. Taking that action plan that you need to take, we're all going to come up with those mental obstacles. That's part of the goal. Getting over that in an efficient manner so that it doesn't take you days or weeks of the slump. It takes you hours. I mean, I do not feel guilty when I have to wipe my schedule clean because that's part of my action plan. That's part of me working towards my goal. It's so that I have more time. And I can't tell you how much time it has saved me in the long run, having that action plan to overcome those mental obstacles. And then it's kind of the dopamine bonus sort of feeling of it too. When you notice yourself and you knew, ooh, that used to set me back a week when I felt that way, that burst of anxiety. And now all of a sudden you recognize it only sets you back a day. It puts you in the driver's seat again. You get feeling like, man, I am making progress towards this. I am able to take action when these things feel like they overwhelm me. That's a great feeling.
No, it's true. And, even as simple as stopping and taking a breath, I mean, Headspace, I could listen to that man's voice all day long. Let's be real.
Don't you? I know. I practically do.
Yes. Andy Petticombe is the voice of Headspace. And then we'll definitely put his link down in the show notes for it. It's an excellent app because, I mean, there really are. It literally could be 2 minutes of just guided breathing that helps you remember, pause. Am I safe in this moment? Am I okay? What can I do next? And just stopping and slowing down your heart rate to get some perspective shift. I'm a big believer in getting up, making a cup of green tea, and just at least even changing your perspective. Because I think sometimes here we are slumped over our computer. Type. If I could only just send one more email like that. My husband jokes about the one more email. One more email, right? One more email turns into 100, but just stop, breathe. Cup of tea, change of your perspective. And, then you come back and you're like, oh, right. Okay, this is the thing I need to do, and go forward, right?
Absolutely. And it's kind of almost like a small fire has started, right? Like, and you have a little bit of emergency, that fear, that overwhelm, that anxiety, and you want to put out that fire before it spreads, and taking these actions, these just that mentally kind of shift you automatically, even though they're very, very small, they're going to help kind of put out that fire before it just consumes your goal house, You don't want that to happen.
And, you and I were talking earlier, like this is a lot about keeping better promises to yourself. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all about personal integrity. And I'm just going to preface this by saying that I wish this idea was my own, but it actually comes from one of my favorite books on goal setting called Maybe It's You by Lauren Handel-Zander. And it is a goal setting program that I've been toying around with the past couple weeks because it caught my attention because it's about building up personal integrity. Because here's the thing, and I don't know if you're anything like me, but we promise everyone everything, right? I'm constantly saying yes to things, promising people things. But the thing is, when it comes to our own promises, the things that we want to achieve in our life, we usually break the promises to ourselves first. We think that can be on the back burner. And get this, you can't achieve your dreams if you don't trust yourself to do it. By breaking those promises to ourselves, we're deteriorating that trust. I mean, when it finally got through my skull that if I would never treat my husband or my family members the way that I would treat myself. And, I would have zero trust with them if I broke as many promises to them as I do myself. And that, and realizing that, and I think this book does that so brilliantly, is that she has this whole program about how you set promises with yourself. Yeah. And really, it's kind of, I was mentioning that gamification before. It's kind of like reverse gamification a little bit in the way of her program, which I think makes it unique, is that it's about consequences rather than rewards. So this is a little bit tricky to get to. And whenever I describe it to people, what I've been doing for the past, I've been toying around with it for 14 weeks or so. And it's taking, it's setting a consequence, kind of putting that high stakes situation, like I mentioned before. And it's rather, because here's the thing, if we promise ourselves new running shoes after we lose X amount of weight, well, we didn't have those shoes to begin with. So, okay, well, I didn't have them anyways. I don't care, but when you take away something you really love, like, I know this is silly. For me, I love LaCroix. I'm a big sparkling water. I used to be a big soda person, but I tried to get healthier. And so now sparkling water is my addiction. So if I don't achieve what I want with Soultiply, say for the week or whatnot, in my schedule I set out, I don't get to have LaCroix for the next week. Mm-hmm. And, the world is not going to topple because I didn't get LaCroix. But man, I tell you, I will work my butt off to get that, because I don't want to have to deal with that consequence. But what's nice about the consequences is that once you fulfill the consequence, no shame, no guilt, that was your choice. Sometimes I sleep in extra because it's like, you know what? Sleeping in is worth not having LaCroix, for that next week or whatever it is. So it's really being authentic with yourself and maintaining that integrity. And I think it's a brilliant program for sure.
Yeah, so smart. We'll link it down in the show notes for everybody as well so they can check it out. But I think that that's so true because when you have high stakes consequences to not doing the thing, right? Yeah. It's a motivator, right? But I also want to speak into what you said earlier. I think it's so interesting and fascinating. I'm sure that your data shows is how sometimes we speak so horribly to ourselves. Like you would never say that to a best friend, but the negative self-talk that we say to ourselves, whether that's about our physical body and we look at ourselves in the mirror or, gosh, why haven't I figured out blah, 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 blah in my business? Why is that? Why do we do that, Brittany?
I think what's tough is that if you are a goal setter and goals are very important to you, because, not everyone is super driven. Not everyone, and I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. Honestly, there's pros and cons to both ways of life, I will say. But if you are driven and you are a person that likes to set goals and be very active in that, you have this standard for yourself. You have this standard for your life. That's important to you. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to be hard on yourself. Something that's very interesting because I speak to millennial women who are just kind of, new to adulthood, are, schooling is very fresh in their minds. Oh my goodness. It's a resounding, it's qualitative research, so I can't put any statistical significance to what I'm hearing. It's all story-based. Sure. But the amount of women when I ask them, so what were your grades like during school? Or what extracurriculars did you do? They were the class presidents. They were the A+, the AP classes. They were doing big things. And within that structure, you get rewarded by your family, your friends, your, colleges, admission professionals. I mean, you get rewarded in that structure. And so then when they blossom out into normal adult life, they're expecting that kind of reward system, and they're looking for that kind of I'm doing good versus I'm not doing good, and recognition. And then even with themselves, they hold themselves to such a high standard that they get really hard on themselves because I don't know the rules. What are the rules for this? Like, how do I succeed? How do I, become successful with this? And so they do it to themselves. And that can become a really slippery slope because that's just not how life operates.
Well, we live in an Amazon Prime Now life, right? Yeah. So we expect immediate and instant gratification in every aspect of our life. What? I can't have the answer right this second? What? I haven't earned $200,000 a year in my career? Why not?
And social media. Oh my gosh. We have numbers assigned to people of their influence. Yes. How cool they are. How pretty they are. Oh, those, if I could get rid of, maybe not one thing, but one thing I would love to get rid of is those 30 under 30 articles that come out. Oh my goodness. God forbid. I mean, I'm 28 and it's like, I'll even have moments where I'm like, I have 2 more years. Like,
so
I need
silly.
To make the list, it's so silly.
But true.
And I can't tell you how many people are like, if I'm not above and beyond, or I'm not recognized in these way, and these publications on social media this way have this many followers, that they feel like they aren't worthy of their goals or whatnot. And it's sad because that's not the case. And we're treating ourselves really horribly, not how we would ever treat people that we love because of it.
So I think that the practical takeaway, if you're listening at home, is when you catch yourself saying something super negative to yourself, or like looking at yourself in the mirror and going, I'm just disgusted by blah, 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 blah. Just stop, pause, take a breath, and say what? What would you say?
I would say twofold. One, I'd say think of the person that you love more than anything that you do anything for. Keep them in your mind. Go through all your senses. What do they look like? What do they smell like? What do they, picture them and say, would I ever treat them that way?
Yeah.
I think that's a good starting point, because when we can't be kind to ourselves, at least start somewhere, build that up. Most likely you would not have treated them that way. And then really just honor yourself and say, is this going to help me in my goals, treating myself this way? Because I can't think of any amount. I mean, there are ways that you can apply pressure and apply accountability in healthy, constructive ways that bolster you and make you feel good, and not in ways that are self-defeating.
Right.
And I think kind of recognizing those habits. I mean, it's really just, it's a habit, and recognizing it and really tying it to something is going to help you limit it. And then just over time, it will slowly go away. It will get better.
Yeah. I think anchoring it down with a positive affirmation, giving yourself the self-love that comes from journaling. I love that as a concept. I mean, it helps you really start to break down all the things that are swirling in your head, and you can see it on paper and you go, oh, actually, that's ridiculous. Why do I think that? And moving steps forward.
Absolutely. It gets you out of your logical brain too, because you're reading it. You're reading it. I mean, we read books all the time. We read things all the time. You're reading your thoughts and you're like, when I did that with my excuses, I was like, oh, that is so silly. Like, I can't believe this one excuse impacts all these areas, because I was reading it. It's not just floating around in your head. It really does help.
So talking about reading, is there any great books or maybe a blog that's inspiring you or challenging you right now?
Absolutely. Well, a go-to for me all the time, and I reread it and read it again, is Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. I love anything she's a qualitative researcher as well, so I'm a little biased. I love the work that she does on shame, and so I love that. I already kind of mentioned, I think the one that's challenging me is the Maybe It's You by Lauren Handel Zander. I mean, that is just, that's not an easy read. I won't say that by any means. You got to do the work. It's more like a coaching program written down. But it is great if you're looking to rebuild that trust in yourself and that personal integrity, for sure.
Great. Well, we ask these next few questions to every single person that comes on to the Simplifiers podcast. So my first question for you is this. Tell us one person, some super smart person that you know in your life, in your community, that is doing amazing things that we should interview on the Simplifiers podcast, and why.
Gosh, when I think about simplification, I am going to have to say a dear friend of mine for a long time named Lauren Moore. She actually, and this isn't the reason why I picked her, although I'm sure she'd be happy about it. She actually just launched her own podcast called Brand Therapy just a few days ago.
Love it.
But I pick her because she is extremely process driven. I mean, she is the gal that I go to when I need to take a step back and kind of just see the whole picture and how moving parts are relating to my goals. I mean, so she's really just the queen when it comes to utilizing technology to establish any sort of workflows that can support you in your business, as well as gaining any sort of clarity around your brand. She's a brand strategist, and the way that you position yourself, which, and oftentimes that has to do, the way that you position yourself out in the world has to do with your dreams too. So I think she's great for that.
Fantastic. Great. So gratitude and simplicity, they go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for right now?
Oh, I mean, for me, I think it's because I'm still in newlywed phase of my life. But every day, it's my husband. I love him. He is the exact opposite of me in every way. I'm the emotional brain. He's the logical one. But we really, when you talk about how you feel a soulmate should complete you, he's that person for me, and I'm extremely grateful for him.
I love it. Now, becoming a data researcher, then from being an actress first, what would you say is one superpower you possess, and how did you develop that skill or trait over time?
When I first got into qualitative research, I felt a lot of imposter syndrome, because I'm like, how am I going to be a researcher? I went to school for theater. I felt really, and it was a series of wonderful mentors in my life that really said, well, Brittany, it's that balance of right brain, left brain that makes you such a great researcher, especially when it comes to qualitative, because it's all about, it's interviews, it's stories, it's not data necessarily, it's not numbers, and so I would say my superpower is my sense elements of curiosity and conversation, and a lot of those listening skills, which you use in acting a whole lot. And only this time I'm listening to others tell me about their goals and their dreams and their struggles and their mental obstacles rather than listening to somebody on stage.
Yeah.
And being insatiably curious about it, wanting to ask questions, wanting to learn more, wanting to dive deep beneath those surface answers to really get to the meat of it, and just being able to have them open up and share with me, because I really feel honored when they do so, whether it's in my research or whether it's on my podcast, both ways.
I love it. We talk a lot about doing the thing around here at the Simplifiers. What's one thing our listeners could do like today, simple thing that gives them a tiny win under their belt based on our conversation?
I think it's really, I would go back to the simplest of things is infusing that joy, because you don't want to go from, A to Z. You need to take baby steps, I think, when you're first approaching this. And so I think you need to really acknowledge what's working in your life as you see it right this moment. It ties back to that gratitude, like you said. I think writing down all the ways that you experience joy now without having had accomplished your goals, and then pairing that, matching that, infusing that to the actions that might feel a little scary or overwhelming with your goals would be the way to do it. Say, for example, you love to be out in nature, you love taking morning hikes, but you're trying to get an organization system, you're trying to use a planner, it's going to help you, you're going to track. Well, throw your planner in your backpack, go on a hike and do it at the top of the trail. Put yourself in that situation of joy, because you want to, it's almost like Pavlov's dogs, right? Like you want to associate joy with these scary goal actions. You need to pair them so that you'll want to continue with them. And I think that's the simplest, easiest thing you could do. It's a little writing exercise, but you'll see a shift in your mindset from that.
I love it. Absolutely great. So where people can find you online, where do you hang out the most?
Yeah, I think I would say Instagram, Facebook, maybe a close second. Of course, on my actual website, Soultiply.com is where you can find out about the podcast, the research I'm doing, anything like that.
And you have got a fantastic free goal setting tools and resource library. Like this thing has got limitless things in it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the gamification techniques I mentioned today, you could download the actual things from that library.
Amazing. So we'll put the link down in the show notes below, but it's soultiply.com/library. So Brittany, one last question for you to end on. Somebody is listening to this podcast. They're super inspired by your story. They've gotten lots of great tips when it comes to goal setting, and they're just about to put pen to paper and say, right, this is my goal for the next 6 months, next year ahead. If you could just whisper one encouraging word to them or statement, what would you say to them right now?
Well, I'm gonna share a little secret of what that color tracker that I was telling you about earlier. Once I color it all in, what it says to me. Your goal, you were made for this goal. Like you were made for it. Like I feel like anything that our heart and our soul, which is, I feel, means to Soultiply, why we're so drawn to achieve something in our life is because it is an intrinsic part of us already. And I don't think we need to become anybody different. I don't think we need to be anybody different. We don't have to do anything different. It's all about that self-worth, and that we feel like we need that first before we can do it. And it's like, no, the goal is living inside you right now. And I always love that image of those old 90s movies where the lovers are running towards each other in the airport, about to embrace.
Yes.
I feel like as long as you continue running towards your goal is running towards you. And eventually you guys are going to hug and reunite. But you just got to keep running. And it's already inside you, everything that you have. So that's what I would whisper. And I would hope that you would internalize that so deeply, because it's the truth.
Brittany Hoopes, I'm so glad we were on the podcast today. Again, check out the show notes for all the details of how you can get connected with her and all the brilliance that you are. Thank you so much for being on the Simplifiers podcast.
Oh, thank you, Mary. I appreciate it.